In today's time, if you're having FOMO, whether to build web application or iOS application, I can't help you with that. But what I can help you with that is I can help you if you're coming from web application background, then how to build iOS application, and if you're coming from iOS application background, how to build web application. So I will be giving you analogous comparison between both of them. So let's get started. Web app versus iOS analogy comparison. So I have prepared again parameters which we actually need when we are building any application. So whenever you are building something, I'm considering that you need to integrate payments. So payments is one of the important thing in your application. If you don't collect payments, then how will you earn the revenue? So that is the most important question which you should ask every time when you are building something. So for payments, as you know, Stripe is there for Next.js web application, and I'm assuming that you are someone who is planning to build Next.js application, and Stripe is there with TypeScript, JavaScript. It has Type.js library from the npm package. You can use that. But what happens is that in India, Stripe is not available. Then what exactly should you use? And in many countries, Stripe is just invite only or it is not available. Then the alternative is polar.sh. So this particular MOR, like merchant of record, helps you take payment if you're from India or from any country where Stripe is not available, but Stripe Express is available. So this is what you should know about Next.js. And if you're someone who is using iOS, they note something called StoreKit. So Apple manages taking the payment. Apple manages taking in which currency to take the payment from the user, what method to use, and Apple simplifies it for you, and it takes 30% commission for that. But the main point is that you don't use StoreKit directly. You use something called RevenueCat because you want to show a different onboarding to different user, to different region, and club different packages to improve the paywall and improve conversion rate. So we use RevenueCat, and RevenueCat is available in every country because it is not dependent on Stripe. It is dependent on App Store Connect and StoreKit. So whatever projects you create in StoreKit, you can link that into RevenueCat, and you can create offerings, paywall, and all. I've yesterday created one video on RevenueCat dashboard, which you should definitely see to understand how to set it up. And the most important thing in this particular comparison is that RevenueCat offers web billing as well. So you can use RevenueCat for web billing as well, but it comes with a caveat that you cannot link Polar. You have to link something called Paddle or Stripe. So if you don't have Stripe, then you should definitely look for Paddle. So this was all about payments. This was the most important part which you should know. Now comes the API. So whenever you are building something, obviously you cannot build everything on the iOS application. And if you're building something Gen AI application on, you need to call API. And API is something which we should discuss as a first topic after payments when it comes to development. So in Next.js, we use fetch, and it like allows us asynchronous synchronous call. You can see how we use fetch in our Next.js application. And in iOS, we have something called URL session. So we create URL session for each request, and we give the async call to that particular URL. So you can see that let us try await data from URL. So in the URL, we give the URL. So this is how you call the API, and it will fetch you the JSON response which you can serialize. So in iOS, it gets complicated because again it is iOS, but in Next.js it is very simple. You can easily convert JSON into JavaScript arrays, and also it is similar, but yeah, in iOS you have to do serialization, you have to match it with your model, and a lot of things goes behind the scene. Now after that you have caching. So in Next.js application, you do it local storage or cookies, and for complex data you use something called IndexedDB. There are very few and rare people who use IndexedDB. I use it because I have an application subclip.app in which I use IndexedDB to store the models. But if you're not using any complex data, you always use local storage and cookies, which are sufficient. Now in Next.js, it is not by default. You have to the caching is default, but again to implement custom implementation, custom logic, you have to implement it on your own. So in TypeScript, it doesn't come by default, but in SwiftUI it comes by default, and that is the user defaults we call. and in SwiftUI that this is the app storage. So when do we use caching? You know that, for example, storing the dark theme or the light theme. So for that use cases we actually use cache. So this is one of the use case, and again there are a lot of use cases. Now when it comes to complex implementation like IndexedDB, there is something called local DB in app. So if you're working with network calls, and for example if you're building an Instagram alternative, and Instagram, first of all, it fetches the server, it loads, gets the video, then it loads it into the model of the application, then it shows you the video. And whenever you close the application and opens the application, it loads the earlier videos because the network call has not made like fetch the new video. So this is how it happens. So this is the flow which you also build using local DB. At that time app storage won't help you. So you need to understand in which use case you need to use that type of caching mechanism. Now we have something called state management, which is again very important whenever you are building applications, and that is in React. In Next.js it is again React. So you can see for local state we use useState, and for global state we use, for simple application we use context API, and when things get bigger we use Redux and Redux Store. So this is the global state for which we use in Next.js, useState and context API and Redux. And when it comes to SwiftUI, we use @state, which is again useState, and EnvironmentObject for the global state using dependency injection. So these are the few things which you should know as a developer when you are just getting started, from Next.js to iOS and iOS to Next.js. Nobody was there to tell me, I had to ask AI, but I think you shouldn't ask AI these type of questions. You should ask AI directly what a state, what an environment object. But before understanding what an environment object, you need to understand where exactly it is used. So I've given you a roadmap to really get started of how API works, how caching works, how state management, and how analogous it looks. Now you can get like you can deep dive into it, and you can study more about it. And tomorrow I will create a video on RevenueCat where I will be showing you the code implementation on how to integrate it with Superbase, how to integrate it with different payment packages, annual offers and all, and let's see how it goes around. And till then, take care and bye. I will see you in the next video.